Hello everyone and welcome back to Fly From Home. It's been a hot minute since I've been with you here in the good old Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 hangar watching a add-on aeroplane spin around, because there really hasn't been that many light aircraft out there which have piqued my interest enough to want to do one of these videos really, and you've obviously got to have a bit of motivation to go out and put one of these together. But thankfully that's all changed now, because there is this lovely DA40 XLS that's just been released by Creator of Worlds, also known as Cows, who are a developer who I worked with in the past as a tester. I also provided bits of audio and all sorts of different things for their DA42. So I very much enjoy their work. I think they're a brilliant little dev team. They work incredibly hard and their products are incredibly high fidelity, especially in the area that I value the most, which is the model, the flight model, the flight dynamics of the aircraft. So, very excited to pick this up. I'm not sponsored. I bought this with my own money, so I'm completely unbiased for this one. So I've not had anything to do with the development of this aircraft. And we're going to go and mess around with it and fly with it and answer that age-old question: is it worth the asking price? So, those of you familiar with these videos know that they are pretty long. If you just want to watch the flying portion of the video, then there are timestamps below that you can skip straight to that. But for those of you who want to watch the whole yapathon, lock in, because here we go, I guess. So we're going to start off with a little bit about the aircraft itself. The DA40 is very similar to the DA42, actually. You might be forgiven for thinking that it's just a modified DA42 with one engine stuck on the nose, but it actually predates the DA42 by about 5 years. It's actually a grown-up version of the DA20, which was Diamond's original sort of small, light, single-engine aircraft, branching out from their roots, which I believe are gliders. You can kind of almost see the glider DNA in the DA40 here with the long, thin, high aspect ratio wing. But anyway, I'm already tangenting off into the bushes, so I'll try and get it back on track again. So 1997 this thing first flew, and it originally flew with a avgas-powered Lycoming 360, IO360 engine, which is the exact same engine that the Piper Arrow uses, although the 2 and the 3 use a slightly uprated version. It's a very, very traditional aero engine, horizontally opposed, air-cooled, direct drive. Nothing complicated about it, really. It's fuel injected, but that's about the only modern feature that it's got, really. I mean, by modern, I mean, you know, from the 1960s. It's a very reliable, very well-used engine. But if you're from the European side of the Atlantic, like I am, you might be a bit surprised in hearing that, because most of, if not all of the DA40s you'll have seen will have been the TDI or the NG variant, which are fitted with the famous diesel engine that the DA42 is most often seen with. So, yeah, it may come as a little bit of a surprise that the original DA40 was actually fitted with a Piper Arrow engine, and it could either be fitted with a fixed pitch or a constant speed variable pitch propeller. Now, obviously, over in Europe and anywhere where avgas is expensive, the TDI and the NG variants are far, far more popular. I mean, I've never seen an avgas-powered DA40 in my life. And I've been working around aviation for more than half my life. So they're definitely rare over here. But if you are from the US, you've probably seen loads of these, because the diesel-powered variant, or the Jet A-powered variant, is not actually certified for use in the United States. So all of your DA40s are still the originals, the IO360 powered avgas variants. And because one of those hasn't been represented in Microsoft Flight Simulator, because you do get a default DA40, which I'll talk a little bit about later, Cows have gone out and created this fantastic model of the original, of the IO360 variant. So, that's that. What is there else interesting about the DA40? Well, it's a full composite aircraft, so it's made out of carbon fiber reinforced plastic. There's a few little bits of glass fiber, the rudder panel and a few other little bits, but mostly it's CFRP, a few bits of steel in the landing gear and all that good stuff, and obviously the engine block. But that makes it a very lightweight aircraft. It's got a very smooth, slippery skin, very modern aircraft. It's obviously got the G1000 avionics suite, which all of the larger Diamond aircraft are fitted with. Various optional extras and things you can fit to your DA40. You can see this one is actually pretty bare bones. It has a two-bladed propeller, and it also doesn't have any kind of wheel fairings or pants or spats or whatever you want to call them, which are all optional. So if you're a flying school, then your DA40s probably look a bit like this, whereas if you buy your aircraft privately, you might want to tick those optional extra boxes and pimp it out a little bit. Now, the DA40 actually has the accolade of having the one of, if not the lowest accident rate of any serial-produced aircraft in service in the United States. So, incredibly safe aeroplane. Part of that is down to the fact that it has unbelievably benign stall and spin characteristics. It's not cleared for deliberate spinning, but it's apparently very easy to recover from a spin, and I can vouch for the stall characteristics. They are unbelievably safe and benign, just like the DA42s. The other reason is the fact that it's incredibly strong, partly because of the composite airframe, but also partly because of the way it's built, with fixed seats bonded into the structure and all sorts of other things. So if you do have an accident, then you are very unlikely to be seriously injured by that accident, just because of the strength of the crash cell around you. So, fantastic aeroplane to have a crash in. Sounds a little bit morbid, doesn't it? But even better aeroplane to fly because of that lovely long, low wing loading, high aspect ratio wing. Very, very stable, benign aeroplane. Very agile as well when you want it to be. It does get knocked around in turbulence a little bit more than the old sort of stubby wing arrows and things like that, but certainly in normal conditions, incredibly pleasant aeroplane to fly. It's almost like flying a fly-by-wire aeroplane in that you sort of just point it where you want it to go. You can pretty much let go of the stick and it just does what you want it to. Very responsive on the controls, so very easy to maneuver around. Just a lovely aeroplane overall. Probably one of the most enjoyable single-engine aeroplanes I've ever flown. Really, I mean, only the Comanche, I'd say, is a more fun aeroplane to fly, but it's certainly a lot more of a handful in terms of ease and enjoyable flight characteristics. I'd say the DA40 is right up there. So, let's have a look at this one in the simulator then. So, cows do not cut corners with their aircraft. If you're at all familiar with the DA42, they put enormous amounts of effort into absolutely every aspect of it. And the first aspect we're going to be looking at is the outside, the external model, and you can see just how detailed this is, and I hope I'm doing justice to the textures, because it's got a fantastic, slightly sort of undulating texture to all the panels and surfaces, which is exactly what you see on the real aeroplane, because it's kind of covered with a very thin layer of gel coat, which you can almost see the structure of the carbon fiber through. This has got the two-bladed Hartzell aluminium propeller. You can get a three-bladed, I believe it's MT, who do the three-bladed props, which are composite. They're actually just like compressed sawdust encased in plastic, which are very lightweight. So those ones are a little bit quieter and a little bit lighter. But you usually see those on the TDI variants. You can get them on this one, on the XLS. But like I said, this one is a pretty sparsely kitted out flying school type representation here. You can see they've put like little dots across the front here and across the wings. They're like insect spatters, which are inevitable on all airplanes, especially in the summer. You can see them around the intakes there. Really cool to see a little bit of weathering. It's not overly scruffy. It's still a nice, shiny looking airplane, but it's got typical sort of weathering all over it, which is really, really nice to see. So fantastic. It's got all of the detail, all of the screws and rivets are in the right place. You can see the little anti-balance / trim tab at the top of the elevator here. It's got the little linkage connecting it. Everything is in its place and where it should be. You can see the control horns for the or balance horns for the ailerons just under there. So yeah, fantastic, brilliant external representation of the aircraft. Let's have a look at the liveries. So the first one we saw was the default livery. It's just plain white. This one is the sort of iconic early Diamond livery with these grey stripes going up the side. A lot of DA42s I've flown have had this livery as well. This one's slightly more fancy. You've got some wavy blue and grey stripes up the side of the aircraft. Very nice. This one fairly similar, just a slightly different pattern on the stripes, on the blue and grey stripes. And this one probably my favourite, that's got the swooshy Nike tick type things on the side of it. Quite a stylish looking livery. They're all pretty basic looking. There's nothing crazy like bright green aircraft or anything like that, but that's because the DA40s are very rarely painted up in colour schemes because of their composite nature. So if you paint them up in colour schemes, it can increase localized heat soak into the skin of the aircraft that can cause damage to the actual structure of the plane if you're not careful. Certainly damage to the skin of the aeroplane. The most modern diamonds you might see in more sort of vibrant color schemes because they've kind of improved the manufacturing processes over the years. So now you can get, for example, like a DA50 in all sorts of lovely vibrant colors. But the vast majority of diamonds you're going to see are exactly like this. Not a huge number of options, I'm afraid, but I'm sure the good old contributors at flightsim.to will have a million different liveries for you if you go out and look for them. If you've got a flying school livery or something like that that you particularly want to pick up, I'm sure somebody's going to make it. So that's it for the hangar portion. I guess I should load the simulator up and we'll go for a fly around, shall we? Okay, and here we are, actually in the simulator in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Looking good at lovely sunny Doncaster Sheffield Airport as usual for these little checkout flights. Now, if you're wondering, this aircraft is compatible with Flight Sim 2024, so if you do use that simulator or you prefer to use that simulator, it is available in there. But I had a chat with one of the devs who told me that the nose wheel steering logic, which is actually really, really good with this add-on, works a lot better in Flight Sim 2020 at the moment, so hence why I'm in this simulator. Plus 24 has got its own sort of problems and all sorts of stuff at the moment. At the moment, I'm pretty much sticking to Flight Sim 2020 for most of my Flight Sim activities. Right, so another quick thing to just get out of the way. Probably should have explained my own experience and history with this aeroplane. So what sort of position of authority am I coming from with this review? So I used to be a full-time commercial flying instructor. I still do it part-time, and as one of the aircraft that we fly is the DA40 TDI. Now it's used, well, the TDI or the NG. It's usually the NG, to be fair, at our flying school. We've got a mix of the two. So I do have experience with the DA40. However, I've never flown, I've never even seen, as I said before, the avgas-powered, IO360-powered version of the aircraft. So there's a few things that obviously the handling is going to be slightly different by the different weight and center of gravity of the avgas-powered variants. It's a bit lighter than the NG, but it's not turbocharged, so the performance is kind of, yeah, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I come from a position of reasonable authority, I like to think, but my knowledge is not going to be perfect when it comes to this thing, so there's probably going to be some things where I think, well, that might be right, but then again, it might just be my lack of knowledge with the aircraft. So, without further ado, let's crack on, shall we? So, the aircraft is set up at maximum takeoff weight, 1,200 kilos, or whatever pounds that is, if you're American. Basically, so we can check our performance figures against the graphs, and I wanted a nice round figure just to make sure it does what it needs to do. So we're going to check climb and cruise performance against the real-world aircraft's Pilot's Operating Handbook, or AFM, Aircraft Flight Manual. It's available online on the Diamond website. There's also a link to it in the documents section of the route folder for the COWS DA40. So if you do have the aircraft, you can go and look at that. There's also the manual for the aircraft, which is very extensive and well written. So go and have a look at the manual before you fly the airplane. It'll put you in a much better place. So let's crack on, shall we? So let's bring the checklist up. We'll look at the 4 engine starts. So elevator trim is about neutral, put in the takeoff position. Throttle propeller mixture are all set, so idle throttle, idle mixture, props full forward, parking brake is set. I'm just going to squeeze the toe brakes just to make sure, because the brake in the DA40 and the 42, it's just a valve which holds the pressure in the brake. So if you haven't squeezed the brakes to add pressure to the system, the pads won't be in contact with the disc. It's very similar to how the brakes on the 737 work, actually. If you're familiar with the PMDG, then you squeeze the brakes and you apply the parking brake with the lever. Exactly the same story in here. So squeeze the brakes with your toe, apply the brakes, apply the lever on. Ignition is in the off position. Alternate air is just there, but it's closed. It's pushed away. All the masters are off. Alternate static is under there, but it's probably modelled because, yeah, there we go. Look at that. Perfect. So the alternate static is closed. It's closed when it's aligned with the panel there. All the lights are off. Circuit breakers, so as you might expect, all the circuit breakers are operational in this aircraft. There is a random failures system, so it's very much worth actually checking your circuit breakers to make sure none of them have popped. Flap selector is selected up. Pitot heat and fuel pump are both off. The battery master can now come on. I'm going to put the alternator on as well. You can hear the cooling fans for the G1000 running in the background. Sounds are fantastic, as you might imagine, on this aircraft. I believe Boris Audio Works did the sounds on this like he did the DA42. I might be wrong, but he usually is the guy who does all of the sounds for cows. So you can appreciate just how good these sounds are going to be, because he's got a well-deserved reputation for excellent work in the flight sim community. G1000 powered acknowledged, so yeah, that's going through its thing. We'll click through that. Blah blah blah. Yeah, so there's a built-in checklist system in the G1000. So we can acknowledge all of this rubbish and then go to there. If you want to use the the built-in G1000 checklist, you just scroll to the top there where it says user agreement, hit enter, and you can scroll down to normal operating procedures, hit that, and then you can run through the checklist on here, which should be exactly the same checklist as the Diamond standard DA40 checklist, but I prefer to use this one because it's got a few extra little items and tips on that, so that's available if you want to use it. Click exit on there if you want to go to the map. Flight controls are incorrect, so give it a wiggle round. It's a fully castering nose wheel on this aircraft, so there's no problem with operating the rudder while the aircraft is standing still. Flaps full travel, so let's knock the flaps down to the takeoff position first of all. And obviously we'd have a visual check and also the indicator.
System test. Okay.
Thanks, love. And to landing. Lights working. Looking good, and we'll knock them back up and leave them at the takeoff position. Fuel select to the lowest tank. Both tanks are full. Got a selector in the middle here. One of the biggest differences between the diesel-engined variants of the DA40 and this one is the fuel system. The diesel engine version is very odd in that it only normally burns from the left tank, and you pump using a fuel pump fuel out of the right tank into the left one to balance them up, which is really bizarre. But this one has a much more traditional fuel selector type system, exactly the same as what you might find on a PA-28 or a Tomahawk. Doors closed and latched. Yeah, everything's closed. The doors, by the way, do all open, so you can pop them open front and back, and you get the associated caption on the PFD as well. Anti-collision strobe. Now, this is where I tend to differ from Diamond's own advice. I just use the position lights to show that the aircraft is under power. If there was anybody around the aircraft, I might give them a flash of the strobes, but our flying school is quite descriptive with how you use the lights, and strobes don't come on until you're on the active runway. So throttle open 2 inches, so I'm going to open it up until it sort of lines up with that T there. Fuel pump I'm going to pop on. You can hear the fuel pump running now. Mixture rich for 3 to 5 seconds. So we're going to watch the fuel flow and count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to idle. Propeller area is all clear, so you can give you a shout clear prop through the window, and then we start. So the technique is exactly the same as starting an arrow. You'd crank the starter, and as soon as it fires, you throw the mixture forward. So we'll see how we get on. There we go, lovely. Come back on the power, back to 1000 RPM. Okay, oil temperature is still low, but the pressure's good. And volts and amps are alive, indicating the alternator's working. So that's good. We're obviously not on fire, and there's no captions to clear. So that's all good. The fuel pump coming out, come off. Fuel pressure is maintaining in the green. Alternator's already on. Volts and electrical load's been checked. So maybe I should have left the alternator on, alternator off. Sorry for start. Maybe I did that wrong, but oh well. Mixture ground lean. Okay, but we're at sea level, so I'm not going to worry about that just now. Lights as required. We'll leave them as they are for now. Standby horizon can be aligned. Flaps already set takeoff. Pitot heat test. So if we go to that, pop the pitot heat on, watch the amps spike up and the volts go down for a second. Caption goes away, back off again. Caption comes back, and the electrics go back to where they were. So that's working. Avionics mask can come on. Transponder mode and code 7000. Now this is one of the differences between the working title G1000, which this aircraft uses, and the real one. The transponder would always come on in ground mode to start off with, not on out reporting. So I'm going to put it to standby for now. Thanks for that. It's just the autopilot doing its self-test. So we've got 7000 standby. Altimeters, I'm going to press the magic B key, but it should be 1013 on both because we're ISA standard today. Autopilot test. So our autopilot test would consist of aligning the heading bug, engaging the autopilot in heading and alt for now, and then swinging the bug and watching the stick follow it. Which it does do, it's following the flight director there. So that's good, and then you can put it into VS, command a climb, see the stick and the trimmer running, back down again, and the stick and the trimmer running. So, check your autopilot disconnect works, everything's off, flight director can go as well. And we'll reset the trim for takeoff as well while we're at it. So that's all good. That is perfect. That's exactly how it works in the real aeroplane. A lot of flight sim aeroplanes or Microsoft Flight Sim aeroplanes don't do that autopilot test correctly, like the stick doesn't follow the heading bug when you're on the ground and things like that, but in this aeroplane, perfectly set up as you might expect from these guys. FMS setup, we could put a route in, I suppose, so let's get rid of that. Going to be doing our usual flight, as I said. So we're going from Doncaster. Now, this would auto-populate in the real plane, but here we've got to scroll it in. That's fine. It's just takes a second. There we go. So I have just set up Doncaster, runway 20 to Nottingham, runway 27. Put the runway QDMs and all that kind of good stuff on there. Oh no, sorry, that's the track, not QDM. Get it right. Right. Sweet. So this is going to be the taxi check. So fuel selectors full as tank, taxi light on when moving, parking brakes, release brakes, and flight instruments. Cool. I'm going to leave the fuel tank selector where it is for now because we're going to do our power checks on a different tank, so we want to make sure that this one's working properly. That can come off. I'm going to idle throttle, release the parking brake, and away we go. So as I said, one of the distinctive features of the DA40 is the castering nose wheel, and it means the aircraft is very, very manoeuvrable at low speed, but it also means it can be a little bit of a handful to taxi, especially on sloping taxiways or in strong winds. You have to use quite a lot of differential braking, whereas you can see my feet moving around on the pedals is not having a huge effect on the actual course of the aircraft because they're not actually connected to the nose wheel. But the Cows guys have done an amazing job of representing that. If you don't have rudder pedals and you aren't able to use the differential brakes, you can turn it off. You can use the toggle landing gear function and it just behaves then like a normal aircraft. So if you just restrict it to one of those twisty joystick things, fear not. Okay, numbers decreasing, numbers decreasing. Turn coordinator showing slip to the right and a turn to the left. Okay, I'm going to pull up here, just making sure the nose wheel is straight, so you always want to be making sure it's pointing the same direction as the aeroplane when you stop, because otherwise it makes getting going again quite hard. Right, parking brakes set, RPM 1000s, they're all done. So, into wind there is no wind, parking brakes set, engine instruments, so have we warmed up? Oil temp actually isn't in the green, so what we'd have to do at this point is actually raise the RPM a little bit and wait for it to warm up. So, I guess I'll catch you back in a couple minutes. Okay, we're back. Just as a note, I was running the engine about 1500 RPM to try and get the temps up. It took 8 minutes to do that, to get it into the bottom of the green. Now, that might be the case in this aircraft. I'm not sure, but I'm a little skeptical that on a day where it's 15 degrees, you'd be waiting that long to get a bit of oil temperature. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm more than happy to be corrected, but it seems like quite a long time. But anyway, there we go. So that's done. Circuit breakers are checked all in. Yeah, nothing's popped out of there, I don't think. Doors, mixture full rich. Throttle to 2000 RPM. So we're watching our RPM gauge here. You can see the aircraft shakes around as you rev up. The panel shakes about, which is really cool, very atmospheric. Prop cycle 3 times. So we're basically on the first one, we're just looking to make sure it works. We're looking for a drop in RPM, a rise in manifold pressure. Which is exactly what we've got. Really good representation of how that looks. Back to 2000. On the second one, we're looking over the coaming and looking for any oil coming back from the governor, which is in the propeller spinner. And we're good. And then the final one, we're looking for a fluctuation in oil pressure as the system works. Perfect. Exactly what you'd expect to see. So back to 2000 RPM. We're going to check the mags. It's a maximum of 175 RPM drop. So monitor that. To left. It's good. Back to both. To right. Yeah, that's fine. Maximum difference of 50 between the two, by the way, as well. So that's all checked. Throttle all the way down to idle. Check the engine keeps running smoothly. So the oil pressure goes a little low, but that's normal. And then back to 1000. Happy days. Fuel pump can come on. Trims, flaps, and flight controls. So the flaps are set. Flight controls will do one last check of. So full left, left side up, other side opposite. Full right, right side up, other side opposite. Full aft, full forward, full left, full right in the pedals. And trim is set for takeoff. Cool. Lineup checks, lights, transponder, pitot, parking brake, approach sector, runway, and then throttle. Yeah, sweet. Can do that from memory, so we'll get rid of that now and line things up. Okay, so approach paths clear, transponder goes to alt, pitot heat can come on, and all of the lights as well. Okay, lined up with runway heading, T's and P's are all good. So it's going to get a little bit loud, as you might imagine. There is a headphone simulation in this aircraft. Just realised we're still on the same tank, so I should probably switch fuel tanks now as well. So we can make it nice and quiet like that, but for the benefit of you guys hearing all these lovely noises, I'm going to leave it on loud for now. So it's going to get a little bit noisy, but I'll put the headphones on when we start doing some tests en route. Okay, bringing the power up. Having to use quite a lot of rudder to keep it on the centre line. That's pretty accurate to start with. As the speed starts building, you can use less rudder. See the nose kind of bobbing up and down a bit on that nose wheel. It's very realistic. Approaching rotation speed, you can see it on the speed tape there. A little bit of back pressure, very easily just pops off the runway. Try to pitch to maintain VY initially. Flaps can now come up. Okay, so you can see at VY we're getting between 700 and 800 feet per minute, which is exactly what the book said we should have been getting. So the climb performance appears to be spot on, not a huge surprise. Let's go checklists. Okay, so flaps are up. Electric fuel pump can come off. Landing and taxi can go off. And that's the after takeoff checklist complete. Okay, so here we are leveling off now. I'm going to set 24.5 inches of manifold pressure, which is the 75% cruise power setting for this altitude, and keep it at 2400 RPM. And in terms of TAS, we should be seeing about 130 or so, and yeah, that looks pretty much bang on. You get a little bit more speed if the aircraft's fitted with undercarriage fairings, so you probably get about an extra 5 knots or so, but because this one isn't, 130 is all she'll give us, and that's exactly what we're seeing on the instrumentation. So again, amazing job, but did not expect anything else from these guys. There's been a very extensive flight testing process that's gone into this aeroplane, with lots of real-world pilots checking all of the workings. So, yep. Bang on the numbers. Well done. Good stuff. So let's crack on with a little bit of general handling, shall we? So we'll start off with the traditional steep turns. So steep turns, anything 45-degree angle bank or above, maintaining airspeed and altitude. Pop the fuel pump on for it. Obviously in the real world we'd have a sort of really good lookout this side of the aircraft we're going in, but we're in a nice empty simulator today, so we don't need to worry ourselves too much. Keep all the power settings as we are. We're outside of the yellow, so that's good. We'll keep the speed about where it is, and yeah, we'll go in. Bank balance, back pressure. I'll just maintain 45 degrees angler bank. And the DA40, very, very easy to complete this maneuver. It's just such a stable aeroplane. And you can pretty much roll it in, and the bank angle will stay where you started without any kind of effort. It's almost got quite neutral stability, almost like a fly-by-wire aeroplane. Or, so not a great deal of stick going in there. I'm just going to add a little bit of power to stop the airspeed bleeding off too much, and anticipate by about 15 degrees, and roll back to wings level, pushing off the back pressure and bringing the power back to 24.5. Easy peasy, perfect, exactly how I'd expect. Aircraft flies very, very smoothly, by the way. You can tell there's some nice sort of weight and inertia behind it. I've got the HOTAS Warthog stick out today, so I've actually got a stick for flying an aeroplane that's got a stick, and yeah, it's got that kind of feel of weight and inertia behind it as you're making adjustments. But you've got to remember that the DA40 in real life is a very, very responsive aeroplane, so it's not going to feel wallowy and slow like something like an Arrow or a Comanche might do a little bit. The DA40 is a very sort of agile aeroplane, so that perfectly represents that as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so that's that. What else can we do? Well, we can obviously have a look at a stall, can't we? So let's do a Hazel check. So height sufficient to be recovered before 2,500 feet. Airframe's clean. Safety and security is all good. And location, we're clear of active airfields, built-up areas, controlled airspace, danger zones. Lookout, we don't need to do because we're in a nice empty simulator. So as far as I'm concerned, we can idle throttle. Immediately need a little bit of left pedal to keep the airplane flying straight. That's absolutely perfect. You can see the aircraft slows down quite slowly while it's in clean config. It's unbelievably efficient in terms of glide performance. In fact, I read a little tidbit of information that the DA40 descends so slowly in a glide, it actually descends more slowly than a Cirrus does when it's descending with its parachute. Okay, there's the stall warner. Let's keep that altitude on, pitch it right back. There comes the buffet, and we've got a bit of a wing drop there, which you do occasionally get.
Sink rate. Pull up.
But very rarely.
Pull up.
So prop full forward, power full forwards, recover. I'm just going to try that again because it's very rare that you get a wing drop in a DA40, so I just want to make sure it's not habitually doing that. Obviously, I don't usually fly around at maximum weight, but that should make the aircraft a bit more stable, so we'll see. I have done stall tests in this aircraft before I filmed this video, and each time the stall was incredibly benign, which is exactly what it is in real life most of the time. I'd say about 90% of the time you don't get any kind of wing dropping or anything like that. The airplane just kind of wallows around at the stall. It's one of its characteristic features. So we'll reset and we'll go straight back in. Okay, there's the habit. This is more like it. This is the more characteristic DA40 stall. It just wobbles around in the buffet and just wallows, basically. That's perfect. So, yeah, so occasionally you do get a little tiny wing drop in very specific circumstances. Maybe if you've got a tiny bit of rudder in at the point of the stall or something like that. But normally one of the defining characteristics of all Diamond aircraft is just how unbelievably well behaved they are at the stall. Very, very unlikely to get yourself in trouble. Unlike some other types of light aircraft, which shall go unnamed, but have G1000 cockpits and are also made out of carbon fibre and cost a similar amount. Anyway, so in terms of stall characteristics and basic general handling, spot on as far as I'm concerned. It feels very, very much like the real aircraft. Bearing in mind, obviously, there might be a few little differences just based around the fact that this one has a different engine to the type of DA40 that I usually fly. Cool. So, I'll just get her trimmed back out again. Now, something else I like to do from time to time is demonstrate spiral descent. So what you can do is just apply a bunch of rudder without touching the stick at all, and you can see the aircraft's setting itself up into this spiral descent, the secondary effect of roll, of Yor's roll, and vice versa. So you can see the way the controls are linked up like that is pretty much spot on. So yeah, pretty happy with the rudder response. I think it's safe to say this aeroplane, it flies as close to the real one as you can get within the constraints of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So fantastic stuff, really. Right, we'll get her trimmed back out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to align my heading bug, pop the flight director on and go heading and alt, and then engage autopilot. Because we're going to do a little bit of a demo of this aircraft's ability in terms of flight systems. Now, this is something that is very rare when it comes to light aircraft. Normally, you just get a bunch of steam gauges, and you kind of just go for it. Wing it as you would. But in this aircraft, you can almost do all the same sorts of things that you can do in an airliner, in fact more than what you can do in some airliners. So if I load a visual approach for runway 27 in here via the straight waypoint there, leave the minimums off and activate it, enter and go to nav. We can also go to VNAV, I guess, and wind the altitude window down to 1500 feet initially. So what should happen here is that what I've done is basically load up a GPS-based approach track into Nottingham on runway 27, which should, based on the WAS guidance, wide area augmentation system for the GPS that gives very accurate 3D navigation.
Vertical track.
Here it comes. You can see VNAV path armed on the FMAs there. It should fully 3D, as if you were following an ILS, take us into runway 27 at Nottingham. Now, bear in mind, I am going to do some of the old school flying in a second, but I just thought it might be interesting to see some of this type of stuff. We're on the right tank. In fact, let's flip to the left tank. So we're getting a little bit of imbalance now. And we're going to go to the checklist and make sure this is all good. So landing data, yeah, runway 27, QNH is 1013, altimeters are set. ComNav FMS all set up, seatbelts, yeah, adjustable backrest, great. Fuel selector, full of tank up, just done. All good. I'm going to pop the fuel pump on as well. Ready for the descent. And I'll also pop a landing light on. So you can see the aircraft is now tipping into the descent, maintaining this glide path, presumably 3-degree glide path that the G1000 has calculated as the most efficient descent profile for us. Effectively, what it did on that page there when I brought up the procedure is it's calculated a top of descent altitude, which is, well, it's more like 1600 feet, isn't it? Which is based on elevation and all sorts of other things. So it's just invented its own precision approach, which is incredibly smart. Now, obviously, things like this are only to be used in conditions where you can actually see where you're going. You'd be pretty foolish to be using this in hard IMC, because there is no provision for obstacles or anything like this on this this setup. So if there's a huge tower or something on final approach that normally when you're visual you'd be able to sort of maneuver around, this has no consideration to that. It just paints a line out into space. So just a little note for all of you real-life pilots out there, if you're lucky enough to have this sort of system, please don't be relying on it to fly through horrible weather conditions, because you will get yourself in trouble one day. Okay, we're coming around the corner now, 200 feet to go till we level off, but hopefully, if I've timed this right, I'm going to be able to, coming into half scale here, get it in approach mode. It should capture the glide path, hopefully. Alt hold, maybe not, maybe I've just missed it. So if we VS and we go down, I'll just wind that down a bit, go to VS and pop that. It should capture the glide path momentarily. Pop the taxi light on. I mean, this kind of functionality is, in my mind, it's like airliner stuff. It's so very different to the types of light aircraft that I normally fly. Okay, glide path captured. Set sensible missed approach altitude, 1,000 feet. Speed below 108 knots. Pop the flap in. Going to pop the prop full forward, ready for a go around if needs be. Parking brakes released, undercarriage is fixed, mixture's full rich, mags are on both, fuel's on sufficient imbalance, flaps are deployed, T's and P's green, hatches and harness secure, all the lights are on, we are good to go. Landing flat. Now normally with a TDI we'd probably approach about 80 knots or so. Back to about 75 over the numbers. This is a bit lighter aircraft, so I'll use a slightly lower approach speed. Manual flights. So we're going to touch and go off this one. And into the circuit. The trick is to kind of aim a little bit before place where you want to touch down with this aircraft, so it does have a bit of a float to it. I tend to tell people to fly it like a DA42 really. If you flare about the same height you should be okay. There we go. Full power, flaps to take off, rotate, away we go. Hit a stall and having a bit of a meltdown, that's a typical DA40 feature. For once it's not just me being incompetent. Okay, let's take that down to about 900 feet for the circuit here. Sort of guessing at a sensible circuit power setting, but I think about 20 inches should probably do it. We don't really want to be going any faster than 100 knots around the circuit. This time around, we'll try a flapless approach. Just got rid of that flight director because it's giving me some dodgy guidance. There we go, lined up with the runway. Okay, brakes are still good, undercarriage is still fixed, mixture still rich, mag's still on both, flaps are up now. Instruments are on the green carpet we don't have, hatches and harnesses are still secure and the lights are all on. Just going to make the turn before the village. You can see just to the left of the nose. Now, on a flapless approach in an NG DA40, you've got a lot of drag from your prop going into disc mode, so it's not actually that difficult. In this one, I suspect it's going to be a bit harder, but I will be a bit aggressive with my throttle. I'll also put the prop full forward now. Should help a bit, but traditional propeller doesn't really disc like the one on the NG does. Sort of situations like this, I kind of wish I had one of those eye tracker headset things, but they're really expensive. 80 knots at this point is pretty good. Maintain 80. Start turning now. It's not too bad. Speed's a little fast now, bring this throttle back a touch more, almost in a glide at this point. Hop over those inconveniently placed trees. Touchdown, full power, flaps to take off. Away we go. Still Warner having a meltdown. Suppose we are a bit slow. Speed recover to VY. Above 500 feet, the flaps can come up. Prop can come back to 2400s. Okay, so this time around, perhaps against my better judgment, we'll try a glide approach. So I will cut the throttle on the end of the downwind leg. Keep this one a bit tighter. And I'll just hope that the glide performance of the DA40 saves me. Not actually done one of these in this airplane yet, so this could be a horrible disaster. Okay, brakes pressurized, undercarriage fixed, makes managed good, fuel sufficient imbalance, still on the fuller tank. Flaps don't need just yet, hatches and harness secure, lights are on. Passing the end of the runway, okay, oh no, we've had an engine failure. So what I can do straight away is pull the prop all the way back to course pitch to give us a bit less drag, just in case we need that. I suspect we won't, but I'll do that initially. We're also going to pitch to set best glide here. Yeah, I think we've got plenty of height here. Going to have to start throwing flap out in a second. I'm just going to maintain a continuous turn to come back towards the runway. That's looking good. The prop's going full fine now. Speed check, flaps to take off, and yeah, speed check, flaps landing. Still pitching for that best glide speed. I think we're probably going to be a little high, so I'm just going to square this out a little bit so I can make a slightly sharper turn which shall wash off some of this altitude. Bit of a side slip. We'll see how we go. Ooh wee. Yeah, she liked that. There we go. That's got the height off. It's looking pretty good now. Get it back on the centre line. Oh, beautiful. Halfway down the runway, but I'll take it. There we go. Standard CPL/PPL style circuit detail. Probably more interested in how the airplane performed than how I performed, and as far as I'm concerned, that was spot on. Obviously, my experience of this particular variant of the airplane is lacking, but as far as I could tell, it was extremely good. Come off that, go back to the checklists. So, flaps can come all the way up. Okay, flaps up, pitot heat off, electric fuel pump off, alternate airs closed, landing and text out, landing and stroke and go. And we'll stick her on the line. Okay, next checklist. Parking brakes set, engine instruments are all good. MFD, engines, systems, yeah, that's looking great. Total time service is fine, ELC is not active, avionics mouse can come off. All electrical consumers are off. throttle 1000 RPM, ignition, ground check. So this is, have to be a bit quick with this. So you go all the way off to check that the engine does actually stop, but you don't actually let it stop. Mixture idle cuts, and this should actually stop the engine. There we go. Ignition can now come off, and those lights can go. Interior lights off anyway. You can shut up. Start key remove. Well, you can't unless there's a click spot I'm not seeing. I don't think you can remove the start key. And electric master switch goes off. Happy days. Successfully survived another trip. Okay, so before I do the conclusion right at the end, there's just a couple of little features that I think I should probably show you that I didn't showcase on the flight. So first of all, you have charts which are provided by Navigraph on here. So you can, for example, if I load something up that's actually got some. Okay, so there we go. Just put Heathrow in there, and you've got the full airport chart there, and obviously all of your other stuff, airports related diagrams, parking stands, taxi charts in there. Flip to the approach, and there's all of your instrument approaches for Heathrow, stars, departures, SIDS. There's even an option to get the weather, the taphometer on there. So fantastic little feature there that you can take advantage of if you've got a Navigraph subscription. The other thing I should probably have showed you is the way that you control the systems in the aircraft in terms of the failure systems and maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So if you come to the engine management screen and press menu here, all of your modes are up there. So if you want the random failures, you've got options of just hit enter to cycle through them. Normal rates of failures, high rates, or insane chaos mode. You can use state saving, so every time you load the aircraft up, it's in the panel state that you left it in. Engine damage, so you can damage the engine. The very, very complex engine management simulation that they've implemented with this aircraft. And if you mismanage it in various different ways, you can foul spark plugs, you can damage the cylinder bores and all sorts of things by revving it up when it's too cold and all these sorts of things. So very, very effective engine damage simulation. That's how to turn it on and off there if you want to turn it off and just not worry about it. Realistic parking brakes. I was describing the way the parking brake works in the DA40 and the 42, and then you have to squeeze the brakes and then put the lever on. But if you don't want to have to do that, you can turn it off there. The starter procedure. So what you can do is you can trigger the starter using the mixture lever, I believe. So it's to, if you don't have a separate mixture control on your yoke or throttle or whatever you've got set up, that enables you to do the realistic start with the mixture at idle. Panel shaking, obviously we saw that when we were doing the engine runs. Reset any damage and failures that you've got, and you can also adjust the trim speed that you've got there. So that's all there. There's also a leaning assist. I didn't actually demo that, probably should have done. But when you're leaning the engine out using the fuel flow mixture control here, the assistant will actually show you at which point the cylinder head temperature reaches its peak and then starts to fall, which is the peak power delivery. And you can then either go rich of peak or lean of peak, depending on if you're going for max power or max efficiency. So very handy there. Okay, so here we are, finally ready to come to some kind of conclusion about whether you should buy this aeroplane, in my humble and highly uneducated opinion. So I've broken it down into positives and negatives, as I always do, and we're going to start with the good stuff. So the positives. External model and interior model I've got on there. As you can see, it looks absolutely lovely. It's weathered, it's got textured skin, it's got absolutely everything you could possibly want from a flight simulator aircraft. Everything is where it should be. Every static wick, every rivet, every screw It's even covered in bug splatters. What more could you possibly want? So the exterior is fantastic. I mean, pretty much every Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft looks fantastic to some degree or other, but this is certainly well up hit there. And you can even see the branding on the sidewalls of the tyres and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, fantastic. The interior is definitely up to the standards of some of the best out there. You can see the textures on the seats that I'm sitting on here. It's very sort of evocative of the real thing. Looking at this, it's kind of this is sort of meshy fabric to absorb the sweat from your sweaty butt and back, whereas this is all leather. Although our aircraft have kind of cream leather, which is incredibly hard to keep clean. See the fire extinguisher down here with the lovely cows logo on it and all that good stuff. Overheads and the doors. I've already showed you the doors work. Oh, the back one does as well. I suppose I could show you that. There we go. There we go. Rear door even comes with the sound of the gas strut. Look at that. Lovely. Getting closed again before that incredibly noisy truck makes me deaf. See all the headset jacks in the back here. And there you go. Now you can see the fire extinguisher. Is it in the green? It's in the green. Hopefully it doesn't need inspecting. Right, yes. So the interior of the DA40 looks obviously exactly like a real one, as you might imagine. It's even got things away from the line of sight that you'd normally see. Things like this little placard down here with the alternate static, alternate air. You can see they've even got the screws and rivets and cables and things underneath the panel. So that's the kind of level we're working with here. So definitely a positive, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a better looking aeroplane in this simulator right now. The next thing I've put on there is the sounds. Hopefully I showcased how good the sounds are in this add-on throughout this checkout flight. The external sounds capture the sound of an IO360 engined aircraft extremely well. Obviously I've never flown one of these before, but I've flown plenty of IO360 engined aircraft, and they all have roughly the same sort of sound to them. Interior sounds excellent, very loud and evocative of a real airplane. Obviously you've got the noise cancelling headphone simulation, so you can put your Bose on and chill out, which is really, really handy as well. But it's not just the engine sounds, it's also all of the switch sounds and the... Oh, that one doesn't have one, but... Does that not have one? I'm just proving myself wrong. But it's all of the switch sounds as well and things like that that really make the... there we go, you can hear the little clicky volume button there. It's got its own custom sound. So, yeah, fantastic job with the sounds. I believe it was Boris Audio Works who did it, who his work is, like I said, well-renowned in the flight sim community for very, very good reasons. So the sounds are a big, big plus. The next ones that the next positive I've got is a big one. It's the systems depth of the aircraft. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean just how complex all of the different subsystems of the aircraft have been represented here. So things like the engine simulation, the G1000 and all the depth of the G1000, the failure system, the wear system, all of the electrical bits and pieces which are all there, all of the circuit breakers operating and cutting out the relevant system when you pull them. Even small things, so things like the autopilot check being absolutely spot on. When you do the propeller RPM check on the ground as part of the engine run-up, that behaves absolutely perfectly how you'd expect it to happen in real life. The mag drops are absolutely spot on. All of those sort of little things, if you are a pilot of the real airplane, those are the little sort of niggly things that you'll start to really immerse you in this aircraft. So, no offense to everybody out there who's a flight sim fan and not a real pilot, because you're absolutely just as valid as all of the qualified pilots out there. But if you are a qualified pilot, those are the sorts of things that really sort of immerse you in a flight sim add-on. And I think they've done a fantastic job of getting all of those things in there. Also, with the nose wheel steering and the parking brake and all that kind of good stuff. It's fantastic. And also starting the engine as well, having a simulation of actually being able to crank the engine actually starting, and then being able to throw the mixture rich after the fact. I have yet to come across an aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator that can do that. Bear in mind, Just Flight and what have you, very, very good developers have all represented IO360 engined aircraft, which are excellent, but they haven't been able to bring that feature. So massive hats off to Cows. They've obviously done an unbelievable job with this, and they've obviously worked very, very hard in making sure they can bring that to the simulator. The final one, probably the most important one, certainly the most important one for me, the flight modelling and the handling of the aircraft. It works bang on the numbers, it flies on the numbers, it works exactly how you'd expect it to in terms of climb and cruise performance, descent. The drag modelling seems very, very good. The overall feel of the aircraft is there. It's not overly stable, but it's not overly twitchy either. There's inertia to the way the aircraft moves around, but it's responsive just like the real airplane is. It's very forgiving in the stalls. It's very forgiving in steep turns. It's very forgiving in the glide. Everything is exactly how you would expect it in the real airplane, with the proviso that I've obviously have not flown this particular version of the airplane, so I can't give an absolute definitive yes, this is perfect. But it flies close enough to an NG that I would say, yeah, spot on. And obviously the things like when you idle the throttle and you don't have the same amount of drag as an NG, that's for very good reasons, because the prop doesn't disc like the NG's does. So yeah, I'd be hard pressed to pull anything up about the flight model of the aircraft. It is really that good. And if you are a student learning to fly in one of these airplanes, or doing your CPL, or doing anything in one of these things, this is definitely a great training aid to help you with all of your various general handling maneuvers. Right, so that's all of the positives, and there were a lot of them. There are some negatives. They are pretty niggly, to be fair, but I've scraped and tried to find at least some, so I sound a lot more balanced in my in my opinions. So the first one I've got on there was the engine warm-up. So in my experience with the NG, obviously completely different engine, but it does take quite a long time to warm up. Normally you will taxi out, you'll start up, taxi out. It'll take maybe 5-6 minutes to taxi out, and the engine quite often isn't warm, so you've got to wait a couple more minutes for it to warm back up. But 2-3 minutes at most at a higher RPM, and the engine will be ready to do the engine run-up. This aircraft, was it 7-8 minutes I was waiting? Does seem a little excessive, and certainly in terms of the Arrow, that I've flown hundreds and hundreds of hours in the Arrow, over 600 I believe. I've never had to sit and wait for an Arrow's engine to warm up for anywhere near that amount of time, even on the coldest of mornings. So unless the DA40's cooling is unbelievably efficient, overly so in some ways, then perhaps that's a little bit inaccurate, and it's just something, because I don't believe it's an oversight. I just don't think they could have turned out such a well-rounded aeroplane and just forgotten to give an accurate engine warm-up simulation. Maybe it's something that's just a side effect of all the other things that's going on behind the scenes. I don't know. Or maybe it's accurate. Maybe I'm talking out of my seat of my trousers, and that's exactly how the real aeroplane is. Please, if anybody's flown one of these in real life, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, because I'd hate to be criticising this aircraft needlessly. But until I'm proven wrong, that's going in the negatives. The next one I've got here, literally a devil's advocate, because I'm not a huge fan of them, but EFB, it doesn't have an EFB. Almost every flight sim aeroplane has an EFB. Obviously in Flight Sim 24 there's a standard EFB that's in absolutely everything. I hate EFBs in light aircraft. They block part of the windscreen if you put them around here or what have you, or they're on your knee and they're just distracting you. I'm not a believer in EFBs in light aircraft. I use one in the 737 in my other job, and sure, yeah, fine, multi-crew environment, having an EFB is great to run the journey log and all the other sort of menial first officer tasks that you'd normally have to do on paper. But in a light aircraft, not a huge fan, so I don't miss it at all. But certainly some of you out there might appreciate having an EFB to do things like adjust those options that I showed you on the G1000. It might be easier to have an EFB to do that, to have your Navigraph charts up there instead of having to access them through the G1000. All that sort of stuff, I completely understand if you would prefer that. But obviously that's not an option on this aircraft. So if you are the sort of person who would really prefer to have something like that, then that would be a negative for you. Next thing I've got here is a really silly one, but I've put it down anyway. It's lack of liveries. There's only, what, 4 or 5 liveries for this aircraft. Not a huge amount of choice, and they all look fairly similar. But that is accurate. That's the choice of liveries are exactly the ones you would be able to get on a DA40 from Diamond, unless they've changed it recently. Like I said when I was doing the hangar segment, modern Diamond aircraft can have much more vivid colour schemes because of the construction methods have evolved over the years, and the issue with heat soak from the environment isn't quite as bad as it used to be. So maybe you can have a bright pink DA40 these days, and cows are missing out on something by not including that. But as far as I'm concerned, all the DA40s I've ever flown and seen are all in very sort of mundane colour schemes, and normally you will just get things like the wingtips painted in bright colours, because the wingtips are part of the, or one of the glass fibre GRP elements on the airplane, which aren't as susceptible to damage due to excess heat. So yeah, you might say, yeah, there's not many liveries. Well, and I would say go to flightsim.to and download some then. But again, I've put it down as a negative because that may affect you. The final one I've got on here is, again, completely not Cows's fault at all, but it might be a consideration depending on the kind of flights you'd like to do in Flight Simulator. And it is, the DA40 is, I mean, this particular version's actually got quite big tanks. It's got 50-gallon tanks, so it's got exactly the same sort of range and endurance, I'd say, as a Piper Arrow, but it flies slower than a Piper Arrow. So if you're the sort of person who likes to do long cross-country trips, just bear that in mind. It'll take you a little bit longer to get through them. If you're the sort of guy who likes to fly high altitudes and all that kind of stuff, obviously it's not turbocharged, so the performance will drop as you climb. It's also not cleared for flight into known icing, so if it's cold and you fly into icing conditions, you're going to turn into an icicle and drop out of the sky potentially. So all of those things limit its versatility on longer flights. Me personally, I'm really sad, so I just like to do little hops, especially around places that I know from real life, because for some reason that just pushes my brain buttons. So for me, I've been enjoying hopping this aeroplane around all the local airfields that I know back in my sort of early instructing days, and have been having a lot of fun with that while I've been testing it. But if you are the sort of person who likes to do those longer, really challenging flights in IMC and all that kind of stuff, just bear in mind the DA40 is not perhaps catered to those sorts of things. And that's it. That's all I've got. So do I think it's worth the price, which is about 25 Great British King's pounds, which equates to, I think, about $31. Yeah, absolutely, I think it does. I think a huge amount of effort has gone into creating this aeroplane, and it is more than worth the £25 I paid for it. I did pay for it, as I said at the start. I was not gifted it. I've not been asked to do this review or anything like that. So absolutely do not regret the purchase at all. And I think that 99% of flight simmers absolutely would not regret the purchase either. I think if you want a really, really well-modelled, modern, single-engined, 4-seat piston aircraft, this is about, it's up there with the best ones. I'd say this, A2A Comanche, Just Flight Arrow, there or thereabouts. I'd say the Comanche probably still the #1, but this is very close. And that's it, really. I've run out of things to yap about, finally. So, with that said, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoy these reviews, please consider commenting, liking, subscribing, all of that rubbish. It really does help the channel, and it motivates us to keep making these videos. And also, come and join us on Discord and chat to us if you want to chat to us about anything, really. There is a Cows Discord, so if you want to chat about this aircraft to the guys who developed it, pop over there. They're very friendly, and they're always on that. So consider that. I'll stick some links in the chat below. And hopefully, if you've got any ideas for the next video, please stick it in the comments. And hopefully, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye.